The musical genius who brought us Star Wars, Harry Potter, E.T., Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List, and more. I'm here to talk about the music of John Williams. Spoilers for the documentary, The Music of John Williams, that's just dropped on Disney Plus, guys. So Jonathan Williams really revolutionized movie soundtrack music. He's done pretty much all of the major franchises that you would have heard of, or at least you've watched a movie with his music for certain. And I saw his documentary the other day on Disney Plus, The Music of John Williams, which is produced by Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg is actually in the documentary as well. And so, because they've been collaborating for decades now, since the 1970s, you do see a number of movies that are mentioned with Steven Spielberg and Jonathan Williams going over, the process of how they made those movies and the soundtracks and how they came about. So I learned a few things about John Williams that I didn't know before. I didn't actually know too much about him before I watched the documentary actually. But one of the things is that, he's really old. The guy's like 92 years old. He was born in 1932, and I think he started off in the military as a musician, and it really ran in the blood by the sounds of things. His dad was a drummer. He used to hear his dad on the radio as well. I think his mum was also a singer too, if I remember correctly. It's really something that was in his blood. He mentions a few times that he really couldn't see himself doing anything else but making music. So this is a guy who really found his calling in music, and it's quite incredible, and quite fortunate, I would say, for him to find out exactly what it is that he likes, and then fulfilling that dream in every way possible. So I think when he started out, he was actually a jazz musician. That's what he was known for, and I think in the documentary, George Lucas even says, when John Williams was suggested for the score of Star Wars before it had been released, that name was mentioned, John Williams, and George Lucas says, isn't he a jazz guy? Isn't he a jazz musician? And whoever it was that was speaking to reassured him and said, no, he's actually pretty good. So yeah, it was really interesting to hear his life and how he developed and how he went from doing these sort of, I think he did a couple of sort of small military movies, as in, I don't know if they were actual movies or if they were sort of internal educational movies for the military, but he done a bunch of films, I think in the 60s and the early 70s as well. These were movies across a range of different genres, and the sense that I get from John Williams is that even from a young age, he was a phenom. He was just a genius. He's just a guy who's really good at what he does, and he's able to continually pump out music over and over again in a variety of different styles and a variety of different genres for different movies, and that's what he was doing. I don't think he expected, and neither do I think even George Lucas expected, Star Wars to become the phenomenon that it did. It's not just a big bunch of movies, but these are movies that are really in popular culture now. John Williams, I think, after doing Jaws, I believe he did Star Wars, and Star Wars was really the thing that catapulted him onto the world stage, and everyone loved that music. It's so iconic when you think about things like Imperial March, basically Darth Vader's theme, or sort of the Skywalker theme, thinking about Luke looking at the binary suns. I don't know how they did that effect in the late 70s in that movie. It looks really good, but the music of John Williams is just incredible. The iconic music right before the kind of the story scroll at the beginning of every Star Wars movie. That was all him. How did he manage to do that? And one of the things that's mentioned in the documentary is that he apparently stopped a trend in the 1970s of using kind of contemporary music, so music from that decade, rather than sort of orchestral pieces for movies. And it sounds like what he did is he really showed that there's still a hunger for that stuff. There's still a hunger for large orchestral pieces, like really powerful pieces of music. And I grew up with his music. My last video was on Superman 1978. He did the soundtrack for that. When I went to see that, they played the Planet Krypton and a couple other tracks throughout that documentary. The soundtrack for the Superman movies is played throughout that documentary too. So Superman, Star Wars, Indiana Jones. I watched the Harry Potter movies. He did E.T. as well. They had the lead of Coldplay mentioning that, whenever he comes out to an arena, he might be walking out to an arena of 100,000 people and he'll play the E.T. theme tune as he's coming out, and he uses that to pump himself up. One of the things that's mentioned in the documentary is that, apparently nobody was going in large numbers to watch movie soundtracks being played live. And in I think it's the 80s, John Williams ends up becoming the head of the Boston Pops and ends up playing a whole bunch of soundtrack music, including Star Wars. And as the way they're telling it in the documentary is that, well, when you're looking at these huge arenas full of tens of thousands of people, nobody was doing that. Nobody was doing that. And then, of course, once you get things like Star Wars coming out, people then will show up in large arenas to watch soundtrack music being played. I mean, I'm here with my Hans Zimmer t-shirt. I've seen him 3 times already. So I'll do that. I've been to the O2, which I think has a max capacity of 22,000 people. And, there's tens of thousands of people showing up to listen to somebody play movie soundtrack music, and apparently that didn't exist until the 1980s when John Williams started packing out these arenas. One of the things that's mentioned in the documentary is that John is apparently like a really old-fashioned guy, which you might expect from somebody who's 92 years old at this point. And he does all of his music sort of manually by hand with a pencil and marking on a page, unlike the younger guys who end up doing it probably on a machine or on a computer or something like that. There was a moment in the documentary where, and I don't know if this was kind of a dig at somebody like Hans Zimmer, because today everyone's heard of Hans Zimmer, right? But Hans Zimmer does use a lot of synthetic synth or sort of electronic music in his soundtracks, and I didn't notice this myself until I went to one of those, the music of John Williams and Hans Zimmer nights, because the John Williams stuff, I mean, it sounded pretty good. It was a small orchestra, wasn't a very big one, but the John Williams stuff sounded pretty accurate. But the Hans Zimmer stuff did not sound particularly accurate, and I think that's just because this is a small orchestra and they can only do stuff with an orchestra. They didn't have any of the electronic or synth stuff. So there's a moment in the documentary where they say, he doesn't use any synth, and I wonder if was that a dig at people like Hans Zimmer or newer composers, or is it just a case of saying, well, hey, he's just an old-fashioned, old-timey kind of guy who likes the orchestra and doesn't want anything to be synthetic or doesn't want it to be synth whatsoever. He wants every note to be played by an instrument, and that if you listen to the music of John Williams, it's incredible. When you look at how varied some of it is, you've got the kind of standard theme tune stuff, some like Star Wars or Indiana Jones or Superman or any of those, very kind of iconic orchestral theme tunes, or even like Jurassic Park. But yesterday after I watched the documentary, I was listening to Duel of Fates from the Phantom Menace in 1999. I'm like, you've got a choir and you've got a violin and you've got like absolutely incredible. Like something like Duel of Fates is very different to any of those kind of traditional, big theme tunes that you'll find in a movie. So yeah, I mean, it was good to see a lot of the life of John Williams and finding out who he is and finding out that he's still performing to tens of thousands of people in his 90s is incredible. A little bit disappointed because I've never found any tour dates for him to come to the UK ever. You have all these kind of tribute bands and stuff, maybe at the Royal Albert Hall or other places, but I've never seen any tour dates for him, which is the reason why I end up seeing somebody like Hans Zimmer instead. I know basically nothing about music. I either like it or I don't like it, but in terms of making music, creating music, the process of that, I know nothing about it. If you're the kind of person who does know anything about music, you might enjoy this just a little bit more than I did. There are a lot of movies in the documentary that I hadn't seen. So there were times where, yes, I'll be honest, I kind of lost interest in parts of the documentary. There were long stretches where I kind of didn't understand a lot of what they were saying. But it was nice to have a sort of a trip down memory lane for a lot of those movies from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Of course, the 2000s as well, because he also did the Harry Potter movies as well. I'll be honest with you, there were times when I was watching the documentary that I was just a little bit bored. I was just a little bit bored. I tried to put my phone away when I'm watching something, and I tried to make sure that I'm focused on what's going on the screen. But a lot of times I was just a little bit distracted. I think it failed to hold my attention in a way that the Superman Christopher Reeve documentary did just earlier that day when I'd seen it. Having said that, if you like the music of John Williams, if you want to know more about him and his early days and how he came to be the John Williams that we know today, then absolutely go and check out the documentary. But yeah, as I'd said, it didn't necessarily always hold my attention, but to just be prepared for that, unless of course you're somebody who knows music and understands it, then I feel like you may very well be able to appreciate bits of it much more than I did. So guys, that was my rundown of music by John Williams, a documentary that dropped very recently on Disney Plus. Thank you for getting to the end of this video. Of course, please do like, share, subscribe, all the other stuff for this video and for my channel, and beyond that I will bid you a good day. Thank you.